Yeah, ギャル男宣言。
Go, 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 ギャル男宣言 Go, 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 ギャル男宣言 Go, 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 ギャル男宣言 Go, 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 go オス、俺ギャルを始めました BK 卒業パンツピタピタっていうか昨日も渋谷好きな食べ物はシーザーサラダガングロメッシュにからゴンレンズパラパラダンスの猛練習パラダイスに陶酔表現中ギャル男ステージ金じゃら銀じゃら銀ギラ銀マルキューセールは仁義なし全身バリバリやっぱり B3CALO キノコを食べましたトランス聞きました調子上がってきたみんなが大好きだ
Hello. You have called the Aperture Science Test Facility. There is no one available to take your call. Perhaps you would like some cake delivered. Well, please leave your name and contact number, and we will portal some cake to you. For science.
Hey, it's SFO. Give me a call when you get this.
Didn't I do this one already? Whatever.
And did you know there's a second season of When They Cry?
The second season is known as Higurashi no Naku Koro Nikai, and unlike the first season, it wasn't released in North America. In order to watch this one, you'll have to fall back on fandub groups and BitTorrent. It's a real shame too, because Season 2 holds most of the answers to Season 1's mysteries. If you somehow only knew of the show via random DVD purchases of the first season, you'd be completely up shit creek. The first episode of Season 2 is a standalone anime-only arc called Reunion, and it was made to help patch some plot holes made by adapting the story into a television format. It's the potential future of the final arc of Season 1, the one where Rina holds the school hostage and duel Keiichi on top of it. It's here that we get a confirmation of what the ending of the cursed killing chapter hinted at back in Season 1. The end of every timeline, whether it's shown on screen or not, is always the entire extermination of all the residents of Hinamizawa, and that this incident is covered up by the Japanese government as an eruption of deadly volcanic gases. This reveal is done by showing Rina, Oishi, and Akasaka all approximately 15 years later, exploring the Hinamizawa ruins.
So why start the season off like this? I mean, it might be a good tool to tie up some of the loose ends from the first seasons, but in terms of the story's canon, it doesn't really make sense.
These are important plot points, pivotal to the entire story, but the way they chose to reveal it completely throws the mythos of the story out of whack. In the Higurashi game, the timeline is erased and reset each loop sometime between Rika's death and the Great Hinamizawa disaster, and time resets back to an arbitrary point within Rika's life. This is not a Back to the Future or Chrono Trigger scenario where there are multiple branching timelines and parallel dimensions created by each jump backward. The mythology of Higurashi specifically states that time is wound backward on each new arc, overriding previous events rather than letting them exist in an alternate universe. So, if this is the case, how is it that Rina, Oishi, and Akasaka even exist in this future? Or better yet, how does this future exist at all? This timeline should cease to exist once time is reset for the next arc. Spoilers again, but at the end of the show we discover that Rika's guardian spirit, Hanyu, has been resetting time and erasing old timelines in order for Rika to finally find a path in which nobody suffers. Everybody's suffering is erased and rewritten each time until Rika finally finds the perfect future. But showing the future of a timeline like Reunion actually proves that in the anime adaptation, the timelines are forking and continuing, not actually being rewritten. In the game, Rika and Hanyu's actions are ones of mercy, constantly erasing people's pain until they find that perfect future. But in the anime, all they do is multiply everybody's pain by 1,000-fold, creating new alternate realities with each loop where everybody continues to suffer over and over. Nice job breaking it, hero! And as if that wasn't enough, they add another anime-only arc called the Disaster Awakening arc. It's 4 episodes long and exists for the same reason as Reunion, to help bridge the 2 seasons and fill in plot holes. Right off the bat, it looks like the goofy slice-of-life parts are really ramped up this time around. They last longer, they're significantly more zany, and they seem like even bigger wastes of time than they were in the first season. This arc hits the usual plot points: the Sandlot baseball game, the festival ceremony, the brutal murders at the end. But what's different this time around is that we get to see all of the events from the point of view of Sadako and Rika rather than Keiichi. In fact, the main character of this entire season is Rika, not Keiichi. Keiichi served as a great partner to initially enter the world of Hinamizawa with. He's new to the area and acts as an audience stand-in. But the show eventually had to shift away from Keiichi to cover the more personal, plot-relevant components with Rika. I can't say I really care for this change, but I don't really mind it that much either, and I understand why it was necessary to eventually leave Keiichi behind.
The Disaster Awakening arc, not part of the original games, was added in order to tie together the first and second seasons, just like the first episode was. Now, here I kinda get the feeling they're just spinning their wheels. Hold on a second. Okay, would you pick up the phone already? I know you're there! You never leave your fucking house!
The next chapter is called the Massacre arc and is my personal favorite of Season 2, although it still doesn't hold a candle to Season 1's eye-opening arc. The introduction to this arc establishes 2 very important things. First, we get to see Rika's guardian spirit, Hanyu, for the first time. Only Rika can see her and talk to her until the final arc of the series, in which she wills herself into the world as a separate person, an event that already raises a ton of dumb questions this show just doesn't answer. But Hanyu's existence at least solves the dual Rika thing that's been happening all show. When Rika acted super immature and cute all the time during the first season, it's implied that it's because of Hanyu. It's not like she was directly channeling Hanyu, rather she's more of an amalgamation of Hanyu and Rika's true personality, which is the more serious adult Rika we've seen a lot of this season. The second point of interest is the 3 rules. Rika never actually calls them the 3 rules in the anime, she simply describes them, but in the game there are a set of rules that govern the events of each time loop. The first rule, Rule X, states that somebody in Hinamizawa will succumb to extreme paranoia and begin to murder people. We've seen this happen all throughout Season 1, to Keiichi in the first arc, Shion in the second arc, and Rina in the 4th arc. Rule Y states that Tomotaki Jiro, the Tokyo photographer, and Takano Mio, the stoner nurse, will always die on the night of the Cotton Drifting Festival. Furthermore, the method of killing will always remain the same. Tomotaki will claw his throat out, and Takano will be burned in an oil drum, making this the most reliable rule of the 3. Often, this event will fuel the paranoia that brings about Rule X. Rule Z states that everybody in Hinamizawa believes the Sonozaki family is causing all the deaths, and that Oyashiro's curse is either real or a euphemism for the Sonozakis killing those that opposed them. This isn't true. Hints throughout the first season, like the plainclothes men, the moving of Teppei Hojo's body, the failure to discover Satoshi's body at the bottom of the Sonozaki well, along with Mion's, and the discovery that the burned corpse of Takano had actually been killed before Keiichi had snuck into the shrine with her, all point to the Sonozakis being innocent. There are other common events as well, like in some arcs, Sadako's uncle shows up and begins to abuse her, or in some arcs Shion isn't sent away to a private school and becomes a regular classmate in Hinamizawa. But these 3 rules always happen every single loop. And this is the closest we'll get to anything resembling plot advancement for a while, because after introducing all this, the show rapidly devolves into more cheery shit. Finally, things get going again when everybody begins to remember past time loops. Keiichi gives the doll to Mio instead of Reina, which causes her not to get set off later on. Reina has a dream in which she kills a woman that in this timeline she doesn't know, but in a previous arc was pulling a con on her father. And as a related note, in any arc where we see Reina living at the dump rather than her dad's house, it's because she hid the body there and feels like she can never leave out of fear or somebody discovering it. Shion remembers her mass killing spree of the first season, especially her gruesome torture of Sadako, with the irony being that in all of the arcs where Shion is not the murderer, She and Sadako are especially close due to Satoshi. Hanyu and Rika also begin to discuss what to do next if everybody else is using their memories to avoid past mistakes. They conjecture that the reason Takano and Tomataki's deaths are constant is because whoever is out to kill Rika must eliminate anybody who would protect her. To Takano, Rika and Sadako are invaluable in her research and have the resources to protect her, so they have to be the first to go. Therefore, they resolve to keep Takano alive at all costs. Oh. Oh God!
せっかくの頼みだしね。どうしようかしら、さとこちゃん。クイズしましょうか。ブロッコリーとカリフラワー、緑色はどっち？
ブロッコリー。
正解。
Boy, you sure fucked up that one, didn't you? So yeah, it turns out that Takano is actually the big baddie of the entire series, faking her own death and orchestrating the death of absolutely everyone in the village at the end of each arc, in a calamity that will eventually come to be known as the Great Hinamizawa Disaster. The final death scenes of everybody, as well as the reveal of Takano and her weird mercenary paramilitary squad as the final boss, is one of the defining moments in Season 2, and what makes this arc stand out from above the rest. However, the central third of this arc is actually devoted to something else. Even though Rika considers this loop to be a miracle as everybody is working in the right direction this time, Sadako's uncle returns to town to abuse her some more. Rika loses hope, and Keiichi is tempted to fall to his murderous ways from previous arcs, but this time he doesn't, and actually begins a social movement to rescue Sadako, where the entire population of Hinamizawa begins to protest at the Child Services office on her behalf, as they refuse to step in. The Sonozaki's even got some big-time politicians involved. It's an interesting angle, but it really should have only taken an episode and a half at the most to play out, not 4. Despite that though, the end of the Sadako abuse plot really is heartwarming. It really looks like this chapter was shaping up for a great ending, but then I remembered that it was called the Massacre arc. Yeah.
The Massacre arc, it was pretty interesting, and it answered a lot of questions, most of them in a satisfactory way. But did it really have to be 8 episodes long? They really dragged this shit out.
The next couple minutes of this review is a mega spoiler, because it's basically my attempt to condense every big reveal into about 2 paragraphs. This is pretty important because the show doesn't really come out and say any of this. You're meant to piece it together with scraps of information from all of the other arcs up to this point. With some extra information from the Massacre arc, we can finally definitively determine the root cause of Rule X, the one where people get paranoid and start killing others. There is an airborne pathogen in the Hinamizawa area called the Hinamizawa Syndrome. It causes people to go to extreme heightened levels of stress, to become violent, paranoid, and in the final stages believe their blood to be filled with maggots, causing them to claw out their own throats. All of Takano's posturing about aliens and demons in her scrapbooks is just random conjecture about the origin of the pathogen. The Irie clinic was set up by the Japanese government to find a cure for the pathogen, and Dr. Irie had developed an inoculation for new visitors and a daily shot for those already infected to keep it dormant. However, Takano had Irie's research weaponized, creating an alternate chemical that will immediately induce the final stages of the disease. But what's Takano got to do with all this anyway? Well, the first third of the final arc of the series is a series of flashbacks, devoted entirely to Takano's backstory.
It's odd that they don't make these flashback sequences their own arc. I mean, the full arc, flashbacks included, is like 11 episodes long. Just like Massacre, it's horrendously bloated, and it plods along just as slowly too. Would you stop playing Minecraft or masturbating to weird fetish porn or whatever neckbeard shit you always do and just pick up?
It turns out Lolly Takano was raised by a scientist studying parasitic infections after her birth parents were killed in a freak accident and she escaped from a particularly abusive orphanage. The scientist began to theorize that almost all violent human interaction could be explained by parasites causing paranoia and fear in the host towards things that are different. He wanted to prove that all forms of bigotry were caused by a brain infection and therefore could be treated with modern science. However, with Japan still freshly reeling from their actions in World War II, this wasn't a topic anybody was interested in reopening, and so his research was never seriously looked at, and he was completely discredited as a scientist. As an adult, Takano has an all-consuming obsession to see her foster parent and mentor's research proven correctly, and that Hinamizawa syndrome provides her with just such an opportunity. But this goes beyond science. Takano spends all of her time keeping the curse of Oyashiro alive in everybody's minds, because she's changed into a megalomaniac who wants to be declared as Oyashiro herself. Takano's funding for the Yamainu mercenaries, the Irie Clinic, and all of her research comes from the Japanese government, who are dismayed that the research done by the previous scientist wasn't even looked at by the Allied commanders that took control of Japan following World War II. Though the government's main focus is to develop vaccinations and cures, there are some that want to throw out every single international treaty Japan has been party to since the formation of the United Nations and turn the Hinamizawa syndrome into a biological weapon. Yeah, it doesn't help that as you reassure people that a bioweapon isn't your intention, that the guy beside you is Hitler. The second storyline within this arc finally shows the story of Satoshi from his point of view. 90% of it is just retreading old ground, though. We know that Satoshi killed his aunt because she abused Sadako, and that their uncle left town because he was implicated in the murders. We know he told Shion, his high school girlfriend, to take care of Sadako if he happened to go missing. We know that Satoshi beat his aunt to death in the woods on the night of the festival with his baseball bat, and yet they still devote several episodes to this.
はい、確かに死にました。検視には私も立ち会っていますから。本当におばさんが死んでるのを確認したんですよね。
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it. Get on with it.
But we also get to see what happened to Satoshi afterwards. On admitting his guilt to Irie, his doctor and baseball coach, Satoshi's latent Hinamizawa syndrome hits its most advanced stages, and he begins to claw out his own throat. Irie puts him into a medically induced coma in the research facility built below the clinic, and uses him in his research to develop a permanent cure, where he's been ever since. The Satoshi plot really is the most well done of the mysteries introduced in Higurashi. Glimpses and hints of it steadily appear throughout the show's 2 seasons, and it's the driving force behind everybody else's actions in this series, with the exception of Takano, although her plan would most likely not have worked without him. It's more relatable than the Rika Hanyu time loop thing, and actually built up properly instead of being a surprise twist like the Takano reveal. I say all this because of all the mysteries this show introduces, this is the only one that has a satisfactory ending. Everything else is a complete ass pull. But after this, there's nothing else to reveal, really. We've already seen how Keiichi and the others plan to change history in the previous arc, and they largely just repeat their actions. The only difference is that Hanyu is there to help them, so the massacre in the forest goes the other way. And the rest of the arc is watching them slowly plod to this final resolution, which anybody with half a brain has seen coming 10 episodes ago. At the end of the day, Takano develops the final stage of Hinamizawa syndrome, as she breaks down upon her loss and is admitted into the Irie Clinic for further treatment, while everybody else survives and has happy lives. The end. At least until they've made several more OVAs, video games, and manga specials, all with plotlines completely unrelated to the main plot and only serve to milk the audience for more cash.
You know, I'm happy to see this whole epic story get tied together, but honestly, it still feels kind of underwhelming.
The show suffers from Lost syndrome, in that it builds up all these mysteries and the viewer loves the ride, but their expectations of the payoff are raised so impossibly high that no answer can feel like anything other than a flat-sounding thud. As an addendum, remember all the swapping between Mion and Shion happening all throughout the show? Well, it turns out that the heir to the Sonozaki family is given a large dragon tattoo at birth. This is never seen in the anime except in the opening, but is a definitive way to tell who is Mion and who is Shion. Mion, as the firstborn of the twins, was given the tattoo. But if you dig really far back into the design notes and behind the scenes shit for the creation of the Higurashi game, it turns out that several days after birth, Mion and Shion were accidentally switched by their parents, meaning the older twin, who should have gotten the tattoo, who was originally Mion, became Shion anyway. Jesus Christ! Also, at the very end of the final episode, you see a scene where this woman talks to a young Takano, getting her to convince her parents to stay home on the day they would normally die, causing them to survive. If I ever review Ryukishi 07's other famous series, Neko no Naku Koro ni, or When the Seagulls Cry, I'll talk about this character in more detail, but here is the very basic gist of what's going on. An adult Rika, having greater control over her time-looping powers, decided to go back in time somehow and create yet another new timeline in which Takano also doesn't suffer. This seems like a pretty good ending for everybody now, doesn't it? Well, without Takano living with her mentor and taking up his research, it dies with him, never fully realized. The government never funds any further study, the Irie clinic is never established, and the vaccine and daily shots from the Hinamizawa syndrome are never developed, leaving absolutely everybody in the village to be completely and utterly fucked the next time somebody accidentally pisses off anyone else for any reason. I think this calls for another nice job breaking it, hero!
And that's when they cry. At the end of the day, it's not bad. The first season has a really good pace, even though it has some faults, and there was enough mystery to keep you hooked. The second season, though, is unbearably slow, and the reveals are kind of lame. That's the ultimate sin of the show. It invests enough to keep you enticed, but then it just shits all over you. Fucking finally! Fine, whatever. What the hell is your patchwork-esque green screen doing in my room? What about everybody dying all the time? What the fuck? What? Man. Maybe getting her drunk and making her do the Tekken Live riff with us wasn't such a good idea after all.